I came to Hunstanworth expecting a church, and I did find one, but I also found a question. Because St. James doesn't stand here as a triumph, it stands here as a reminder. Set back from the road, surrounded by open land and an uneasy quiet, it looks exactly as a church ought to look: stone, modest, composed. The sort of place that suggests continuity, stability, the comforting illusion that something somewhere has remained unchanged. But that illusion doesn't last long, because just beside it, almost intruding upon the scene, are the remains of a peel tower. And suddenly the church is no longer the whole story. It never was. Peel towers weren't built for devotion. They were built because devotion wasn't enough. In these borderlands, faith didn't keep you safe. Walls did. Doors that could be barred. Windows that couldn't be entered. A place to retreat when the world outside stopped pretending to be civilized. And so the church and the tower stand together, not as opposites, but as companions. Prayer and preparation. Faith and fear. Which raises an uncomfortable thought. Perhaps we've always needed both. Turn back to the church and it invites you in, not with grandeur, but with familiarity. There's nothing here that tries to impress you. No soaring ambition, no architectural vanity. Just proportion, restraint, and the quiet insistence that this place still matters. But step inside and the reality is harder to ignore, because what you're entering isn't simply a church. It's a survival. A structure that has outlived the conditions that once made it necessary. The congregation is smaller, the rhythm slower, the urgency diminished, and yet it persists. And in the corner, almost modestly, almost apologetically, sits the organ. Hand-pumped, not powered, not automated. Alive only when someone chooses to give it breath, which is perhaps the most honest thing in the building. Because the church itself isn't so different. It doesn't breathe on its own. It waits for voices, for presence, for someone to remember what it was built for. Otherwise, it's simply quiet. And there's something slightly uncomfortable about that, because we like to think of churches as permanent, as fixed points, as places that stand regardless of what we do. But Hunstanworth suggests otherwise. It suggests that even stone depends on memory, that even faith depends on participation, that without people these places don't die, but they do fall silent. And silence in a place like this carries weight, because the tower next door tells you what once filled that silence: fear, urgency, the need to gather, to protect, to endure. Now the fear has gone, or at least it's changed its shape. No raids in the night, no sudden need to barricade the door. But something else has taken its place, a quieter erosion. Not destruction, but neglect. Not violence, but indifference. Which is, in its own way, far more final. Because what violence can't destroy, indifference often will. And yet, St. James still stands, not loudly and not triumphantly, but stubbornly, as though it refuses to accept that it's no longer needed, as though it's waiting not for the past to return, but for something in us to do the same. And perhaps that's the real question this place leaves you with, not what happened here, but what has happened to us. We no longer build towers for protection. We no longer gather out of necessity. We no longer believe, perhaps, with quite the same urgency. And yet we leave the churches standing, maintained just enough, visited occasionally, respected from a distance, as though we're not quite ready to let them go, but not quite willing to keep them alive either. Hunstanworth doesn't resolve that tension, it simply holds it. A church that still breathes, but only just. And beside it, the remains of a tower that reminds us that once upon a time, we needed both. If you enjoyed this wander through time, like, subscribe and walk with me again, because there are still places like this quietly waiting for us to notice them. Come back soon. You never know what you'll find. Bye for now.